Okay, so this is the first negotiations meeting, and so I thought we'd go through the letters and let each side talk a little bit about what their thoughts are. And I don't know, you guys, the main headings were salaries, benefits, working conditions, and leaves. And then I thought I would just take notes over what specific items under those you are looking at, and then we'll do let the board go then. Sound good?
Yep.
All right.
So, I mean, it's basically about the same letter we had last year. I don't think that we discussed as a team any major specifics that need to be addressed in terms of language and the like. So our, I guess, primary goal to work on this year will be looking at the base salary again, and I've got some information to share with you guys today on that, kind of how I've started the last few years, how we've started the last few years. And then just kind of updates on benefits, and we'd like to take a closer look at the calendar as well. Is that sufficient enough for you, Carrie?
Sure. Benefits, was there anything, did you say specifically in there?
The 403B,
Okay.
how many people took advantage of it versus what you thought maybe, and then about the potentially switching companies.
Oh, okay, yep. Okay, on the board side, the only thing that was different in the letter from the board, and there's one thing, and it's not a secret. I mean, I'm going to be as transparent as I can be on what the explanation is, but we did talk about the wanting to change the language on, it currently says in the negotiated agreement, it says the start and end times for a specific teacher may vary by building. We would like to look at that as a possibility of also by position if it was agreed upon by both parties. So and my example would be, and this is only an example, but if we have a new title or a new at-risk teacher that's going to help a student, it might be worth it for them to not come in at 8 when everybody else does, when all of the kids are in their morning meetings. I'm thinking at the elementary morning meetings, and they're going through all of that, and they don't necessarily have someone to work with. But if they came in at 9 and stayed till, or I guess it'd be 8:30 and stayed till 4:30, they could maybe meet with those students after school. And that would be something we would want to, I mean, it would have to be agreed upon by both parties, but it is something that, and it's just kind of, right now it says by building, which is the way it should be, because we may have to stagger with busing or whatever. This would just be the possibility of something happening, and it wouldn't, and it could be any given day. You know, it could be, if it was agreed upon that Fridays are regular, you know, every day is regular or whatever, but on Wednesdays we need somebody extra to do this, and we'd like somebody to be there after school, something like that. If that was when it would work best for the teacher, we could do that. So,
But keeping with the 8-hour day.
yeah, it'd still be an 8-hour day. It would just be, you know, maybe there might be a better setting where that might work better. But it's not something we would force someone into. You know, that's not what we're after. But there may be a better setup, it came up in conversation about that possibility of having that person stay after school. And I'm like, well, if you talk to that individual, I think you could probably change their thing. And so I just looked to see if there was any language. Well, it doesn't really exclude it, but it might be something that if it's gonna be a possibility, we wanna make sure everybody has the same understanding of what it would be. And both parties would have the same ability to say yes or no, and, you know, and probably something like approved by the district office, you know, by the superintendent after both parties agree or something like that. Just so that we're not.
Is this something you're anticipating, or is this something that's come up already, or?
No, we have not, and we don't, I mean, I don't know that this will ever happen, but I didn't want it to not be at least discussed in negotiations before before it does come up, and then we're sitting there going, no language has to change, but I just want you to think about that piece and how it might be fair if we're going to change that language. Currently, we don't have any plans for it, right now. In fact, probably the next 3 years, if we have teachers that are willing to put in a little overtime, that they would be able to make some money on top of their salary, which is fine with us. At the end of that 3 years, if that money dries up, there might be something else we need to be doing. That might be when this would be effective. But again, we're not really. We just wanted to have that discussion because it's not really excluded, but it should be either included and make sure everybody's on the same page. That was a long explanation to get to. Just be thinking about it.
We did have, while we're on we've had some general questions, and I've got a little bit of a presentation I'd like to give for you guys again this time, but we'd like to kind of confirm with you or ask you about what you know of new money to the general fund coming in, amounts, and as she just said, 403B expenditures versus budgeted amounts, because we talked about it last year, how it's extremely unlikely that 100% of employees would take advantage of that 403B match, and we'd just like to know what the numbers are on what actually happened. Was it what percentages or what numbers that came out to be? Questions on Esser Fund expenditures, and I know that's not an easy answer, so we'll take what we can get there, I guess. And then possible positions being added to the salary schedule that we're not currently aware of. That'd be information we'd like to have. And then she mentioned the cafeteria plan. Vendor discussions that have been going on.
Okay, so let's start with the 403B plan. And you guys, I have to say, I will not always have information immediately available, but Christy usually can get to it, and Christy has already done this for you, so it's because she's good, not because I know it off the top of my head. There were 157 12-month employees that were eligible and 99 9-month employees that were eligible. There were 107 12-month employees who took advantage, and there were only 33 9-month employees that took advantage. So
what was your first number?
107 out of 157, and then 33 out of 99. So it's 68% of 12-month employees and 33%. That's pretty easy to figure on the
first one
9 months. And we did, one of the things that the board did also was they reallocated some of those dedicated funds for the bonus that they gave at Christmas time. That's where they took that money from. So that was the intent, was we're not trying to keep that money from where it was intended. The Esser Funds, okay, so a couple things. The first round of Esser Funds, they gave us the categories that they had to fit into, and all we had to do is make sure that our budget items, that we fit those. And then we also got Sparks funds, which were from the counties. And so altogether, it was about $250,000. And when we did that, we did pay our cooks and custodians. We paid them hazard pay last summer, not knowing what not knowing what we were getting into, and having frontline workers like that. That was one of the things that we did with that money. But most of it was in masks and cleaning supplies and new scrubbers, new misters, a lot of those things, hand sanitizer, and that's where most of that was. We also did invest, there was quite a bit invested in the Chromebooks. Part of that was to extend it, but part of it was also because we knew if kids were taking them home, we'd have to have some for breakage and that kind of thing. And we went ahead and if you remember last summer, we used half of those last summer up front to and then we were saving the other half. The reporting for the system that has to be sent into the state, if by the end of the first quarter of this year we expended all of those funds, we could start on the Esser 2 and get our application in to start getting our hands on those. So we chose to go ahead and expend those, and we used it on the same type of things. And so we just went ahead and wiped them out to get to where we are now so that we can make the plans for the new Esser 2 funds and the Esser 3 fund. The Esser 2 funds, we are writing a plan right now for how we're gonna do them. And basically it's kind of limited, and that plan will have to be approved by a council, and it's kind of the commissioner's council. And basically what they are doing is they're looking at it to make sure that 2 years from now or 5 years from now, when they come back and audit it, that we have all of our ducks in a row, and so that they can't try and take money back and say we used it inappropriately. And especially, from my understanding, there were a lot of people that were looking at doing some like HVAC remodel type things, which is definitely something that may be needed in some cases, but there were some people that they weren't making enough of a change as much as they were just needed capital funds. And so they want to make sure that no one is doing that. So that's it. Our plan consists of identification of students and that may have lost learning, social, health, anything due to COVID-19. So we're going to first identify, then we are going to modify our methods. Especially, we're going to talk about what we're doing for summer school and ASAP after school, and then the addition of 2 new teachers to do. They will be at the grade school, and the idea is we're going to use them. We're going to use them to provide more intervention, so that we'll have more intervention time available. It is possible that as our numbers in grade levels change or whatever, that the administrators could determine that we need another classroom teacher to lower a student-teacher ratio. So we're going to make sure that it's a broad definition in the Esser Fund application, but basically it will be to provide intervention or lower the student-teacher ratio to provide better service to those who we're serving. The way it is right now, and you guys, this is this is we will probably get it back a couple times before it goes to the State Board of Education. It'll be approved at the state board, and then we can start accessing the funds. So we will, anyway, regardless of the way it works, we have to pay for something and then ask for reimbursement. So no matter, it's not like we can ask for all the funds and then spend them, or it's not even like next month we're gonna spend $150,000. We have to actually expend it and then get reimbursement. And I think that's gonna be a monthly deal, so like after you know, every time you pay, or you could do it quarterly, where, especially if it's a lot of it's salary or something where it's just coming out, you could wait till the quarter to get your allotment. Every month we have to make a request if we need additional front funds from the base that the state gives us, so it'll be part of that process. So that's the idea. We are, and we're writing this plan for 1 year. They are recommending that. I have a kind of a 3-year plan, but what they're saying is not to do that. Ask for the Esser 3 funds are out there as well. And so the Esser 3 funds have been approved and they're out there. We don't even have a process to access them yet. So what they're asking us to do is, how much are you going to need this year to get through your year, and then assess it throughout the year, and then anything you don't reclaim is still available and you can write your next plan. Things have to be pretty well tied to COVID, and that's, you know, but there are a lot of things. Making learning from home available is one of the things, you know, because kids may be on quarantine and may have to switch or something like that. Having those things are all part of the process, so that's going to continue to be part of our thing as well. But, you know, testing to identify, and we're looking at a couple of ways to identify students who are behind socially and emotionally. We're going to have that piece in play as well. There's some kind of exciting things going on there that, you know, I hope to be able to report by the end of the year on what we're doing, but it's still in the growing stages and we got to see. But we are going to have a screener next year, a 3-time-a-year screener for kids where they can, it takes about 15 minutes and each kid will have to do it, you know, kind of like any other testing, but it'll be able to identify internal and external factors that may cause social emotional distress or stress at all. The Esser 3 funds are out there, and when we get to a plan for that, I think what they're asking us to do, and so we were looking at over the next 3 years we can spend our Esser 2, and so we kind of put together a plan to spend a third of it, a third of it, a third of it. And that was kind of where we were going. As it turns out, they want us to do 1 year at a time. So we're writing our plan now to take about half of those. And the reason is, if we need it and we don't have access to it to provide more services, we can't get at it. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that but if we don't spend it, if we stay at that third, that's great, and that's where we need to be. So we're trying to be good stewards of that money, and this is an opportunity for us to, I think, really impact kids that have been, you know, set back during this time. And we all know that there's some setback. I think our teachers have done amazing, but it's just, it was a, you know, we also had some kids that chose remote, that are going to have a long road back, and we have, I mean, and everything in between, you know. Some kids chose remote, did very well, but are going to have to adjust back regardless, so.
Carrie, I have a question about that. I think it's wonderful that we've got those 2 new positions. Is there a reason why the high schools aren't getting anybody?
Well, yes. Yeah, I mean, not directly. it's not that the high schools don't need those positions as well. But the student-teacher ratio at the high schools is much lower.
I guess high school, maybe not junior.
Yeah, and so we're sitting there going, that is where our focus is.
Okay.
That's the reason we focus that. That does not mean that if the need arises that they couldn't go,
Okay.
and we're not gonna write it that it has to be at that building.
Okay.
We wanna make sure that there's gonna be plenty of need there.
Mhm.
It is my understanding too that everybody is writing into their plan for additional teachers and that the teacher shortage will probably be real.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so even if you write it into your plan, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're gonna fill it.
Yeah.
And we do, especially identifying in that part, we felt like the counselors do and the social workers, they do a lot of that stuff at the high school for identification, and we feel like our at-risk teachers at the grade schools they have trouble they want to be working with those kids all the time. They need somebody to be looking at the data and help them with that as well. So that's part of it. But again, that's where we see the biggest need, and that's the reason we chose that. We also, we are blessed with a low student-teacher ratio. I mean, that is where, that's by choice. But again, that also is part of the reason why that's why we can't compete necessarily salary-wise against the 501s and the places that have a much higher student-teacher ratio. Cafeteria plan. Okay, so we have talked, okay, so where do we start with that? There have been concerns expressed from a lot of employees about our American Fidelity ability to get help when something is wrong. And we have had trouble getting help from American Fidelity when things are wrong. From September through January, we did not have one of our billings that was correct. So we sent a check to them, and then they sent a check back or a bill back saying it was wrong. Sorry, we billed you for the wrong amount. A month of that at the beginning of the year when everybody's making changes is expected. The 403B additions that come in, you could say a little bit. By the time we got to January, we finally got it right one month, and then it was wrong the next. And so we just started reaching out to other districts on what they did. And American Fidelity has been around for a long time, and they have been they were the gold standard for every district in the state. But what we're finding is that everybody's looking elsewhere. So we have several vendors, and KSB has a plan. There's 2 or 3, and then Call Valley Insurance does have one. And after Christy did a lot of digging around and everything, they pretty much all can do the same thing. Even American Fidelity now is coming back around and saying they can do some of the things that they weren't doing when we weren't asking, but now that we're asking. But everybody would have their own portal. They'd be able to go in and see exactly where they are, at any point in time. You can make changes in there so that it will be real time, and you would have control of that. And that is why Christy, and this is something that we wanted to hear your concerns or whatever before we went any further. But Christy is recommending that we go with Call Valley Insurance, because then we would also have a local vendor that anyone could talk to, and a name, a face that you would know, and the quality of service that we have got on the health insurance side has been really good. And so this would bring all of it under one nest, and I'm very comfortable with that. And so that is kind of the direction we're leaning. it is my understanding that any of the investments will just, I mean, they will just be, a different company will be handling where the money goes, but it won't really change anybody's investments that are already in place. There may be some things where, what we offer isn't the same insurance company or whatever, but you'll still have the same offerings that we currently have, so. That's, I see that as a big win for employees as well. Was there something else that I missed? Did I skip over something? I know what it is.
New money.
New money. And that's kind of the big one. That's pretty much my job. Okay, so we have not got the final, the auditors were here this week, or this last week. I haven't seen them, I didn't see her today. I don't know if but we haven't got the final report there. So we don't know what our final numbers will be for FTE. So, and that, it's down, but even, when he comes and audits, there are things, we know we're gonna lose some money on FTE for vocational, and part of it was some of the class that we had included incorrectly in our initial report, that some of the classes that are vocational but that are offered second semester, but if students weren't enrolled first semester, you can't count their time second semester. So I know it's going to take a few students out. It's the ones that are vocational students that weren't in a first semester class. It's not a lot, but we did count them, and they are, so I know our number's probably not going to be quite, but it's going to be pretty close, I think. The number that the governor's, the projection sent from KSDE, the numbers that were projected based on the governor's budget that was approved, but she did sign it, but she vetoed some line items, so that'll go back. I don't know how that will change it. And, it's based on our initial number, but we were going to get approximately $160,000 in new general fund money.
160?
160. In addition, I believe it's about 25 in special ed aid. So it's about 185 total. It will, and so that's kind of all the new money. Well, Esser Funds, but that's all the new money going into the general budget. And it may not be quite that based on the audit, but I think it's going to be pretty close. And we'll see, because special ed numbers have been up, so sometimes that may weigh a little bit more. And if we take a little bit out, that's a pretty good number to start off with.
Okay.
Carrie, can you tell me if we are not going to be a title district?
Okay, so it won't affect our title allotment, the amount of money we get won't be changed. They give you about a 2-year window of if you go above or below the threshold for being school-wide. And basically the Rossville side of the district has been above or below the threshold that they need to be for free reduced lunch. So, and it's been 2 years in a row. So what they will do is we'll still get the same allotment of money, but instead of, so currently we pay so much of our title teachers out of that amount, each of the 4. Well, now what we will do is we will probably pay both of the teachers on the St. Mary's side out of full title, and then we will pay the Rossville side out of at-risk, which is it's basically what we would have done, only it's just, this way we can do it. And it's beneficial in 2 ways, because if we're not going to be a school-wide building in Rossville, then those teachers could only work with students that qualify for title funds. But if they're at-risk teachers, they can work with any students.
I did not
And-
know that was,
And title, when you're building wide, title, like on the St. Mary side, they can work with any
Yeah.
student. But since Rossville was gonna lose that title of building wide, then they were going to, it would just be more
Yeah.
difficult. This is a better way, and it doesn't affect our overall funding. It's a great thing to have less students in free and reduced, in poverty. That's a great thing. I don't know where that's going. And we have a major thing coming up that they're gonna provide free meals again next year. Have you heard this? So a whole nother
I
year.
heard a rumor of it.
Yeah, so they're going to approve it. Well, the problem with that is, why are you gonna fill out a free and reduced lunch application if kids are gonna get free meals no matter what? And so then, with the whole way that we have identified title
Right.
students, we do have title students that we go through the process to say, this is a student that's at risk.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's a very painstaking process to get them approved.
Right.
And now not being able to use free and reduced, have an accurate free and reduced lunch population, that could be a problem. The state does have a method for calculating that is not tied to free and reduced lunch, but it has not been used in many, many years. So we will see that's another thing. Sending a survey to parents saying, tell us,
Right,
might not be an accurate way to get
yeah.
identify kids as well. So this is, that's where we are money-wise.
Okay. Well, I'd like to share with you guys some printouts that I made. Just kind of a general overview of what I've looked at with the schools here lately. I think we addressed this kind of map last year. We at least looked at it. So this is, the first one is last year's school year, so 1920. And basically, it's just kind of a way of looking at base salaries across the state color-wise. So greens are 40,000 and above. Blues are 38,000 to 39,999. Yellows 36,000 to 37,999, and down from there. And it's kind of interesting to look at the map in general from one year to the next. So this is last year, and you flip the page over to this school year, and it did print a little bit darker. That wasn't intentional, but that was really probably a good idea to say what I want to say, but that wasn't like something I did on purpose by any means. That's just the way it came out. So if you look at kind of the clusters of green and blue, so green again above 40,000 for their base, and blue 38 to 39.9. And the amount of the darker colors is increasing pretty rapidly. And in our area of the state, we had several schools, and most of them were small schools that managed to get above 40,000 for their base, including Royal Valley, Holton, Jeff West, Perry LeCompton, Santa Fe Trail, McLeod. I thought that was a surprising one because they kind of struggle sometimes at Osage City. So that's just kind of an overview of the state. There are now 112 districts in Kansas that have a base salary of 40,000 or above, which is about 40%. I think it's 39% of schools. That's if my total school districts in Kansas is correct. I have 286.
Yep.
Okay, that seems to change from time to time because there's
Well,
consolidations.
yeah, there are
in
consolidations sometimes, and there have been a few times where boards have, the consolidation did not last.
Yeah.
And so you get that breakout.
Okay, so 286 was the number I had off of the spreadsheet, so I was hoping that was pretty close to being right. All right, so those are the two maps The next one is one that you've seen in previous years. It's just a ranking of area schools, including league schools, of base salaries. And I think we've stayed fairly consistent on this. We might have dropped one spot because of Wamego. I think was behind us last year, but jumped ahead of us this year. Yeah, so Riley, Onega, Wabunsee, Mission Valley. So yeah, Wamego was the major change in our general area of base salary. All right, so the next one, the green colored chart. This is kind of a new one, and I just wanted to do it out of my own interest, and I thought maybe you'd be interested in seeing the numbers here as well. So this is base salary per contract day. So I just took the base salary divided by the number of contract days. I've tried this with school days as well, but I thought maybe this was the best representation of pay in general per day in districts. And we're a little below the middle, but pretty close to average on that at 209 per day. The top school being 237 per contract day.
Mission Valley's the one that really, they're the lowest on the blue, but the middle on the green.
Yeah, and that's, I mean,
Because they have so much, they have, what did we
so few
decide?
days.
3 or 4 weeks.
Like 3 weeks less contract days than we do.
Yeah, I believe it hasn't changed. And some of these work days have changed a little bit. I've had to update a couple of them. Mission Valley has 172 contract days and 152 school days. So that's why they shift so far, because their base salary is low, but they also work a lot fewer days. And then one I always include as well, and is probably worth keeping track of over time, I think, is, and I pointed out a graph in the previous years, but I thought it'd be easier to read off of a chart. That graph is starting to look a little ugly. So I guess the thing to look at is the inflation for the previous year compared to the raise of the next year. So like last year we got a $700 raise, which was a 1.84% increase to the base. And 2019's inflation was 2.29%, with this year's rate of inflation being 1.36%. So overall, since 2004 anyway, we've been basically right on par in the long run averages, with inflation a difference of 0.02%. So I would expect us this year to be a little above, the rate of inflation for 2020, and that was a pretty low rate of inflation for that year for obvious reasons with the pandemic. So you guys can keep those and look at them at your disposal. I got a lot more, but I don't want to do too much. It's just kind of an interesting thing to look at in terms of what's going on in the state, the salaries, and what's going on in our area as well. We'd like to continue to push towards 40,000. We're 1,300 away. We know that, with the increase, it's not that different from last year. As far as new money coming in, it's about the same as last year. It might just be a touch more.
It's about the same.
It's about the same.
Yeah.
I'd have to look to be sure. I brought last year's stuff, but that's what I had looked at, and we have looked at, that it's just about right on par. So if we just want to get down to business and look at last year as kind of a model, then we could do that. And a number That's in that ballpark, would get us halfway to 40,000. And then hopefully the year after that, we definitely make that mark.
I hope, yeah, I think that would be everybody's intention for sure. I think, I've looked at the numbers a little bit, and we have to, I wanna make, before I get to, too far ahead of myself, I wanna make sure that our budget, or our, audit comes back, because, we always have to fight over whether a kid's 2.5 miles from school for transportation, and just a little bit of everything, so, but we're kind of in the same boat as we were last year, and, it kind of stinks for us that we're in that dip of the number of students that we had this year at enrollment on count day it bases next year's budget. And that stinks, because we think, there's a lot of reasons why kids would have found alternative educational opportunities or not even made up their mind by September 20th. But we do expect, we've had a lot of kids come to our district throughout the year. I think that's great. And so I think maybe when we do catch up, I think maybe we'll catch up and gain, so that would be my anticipation. And I would love to get back to doing things on a normal level, so.
Carrie, you mentioned something about the Esser Funds providing the e-learning. Are you expecting teachers to still do e-learning next year?
No. That's not, I shouldn't say, we're not going to, I don't even know that you would be able to provide a remote option. I don't even know if that's gonna be a possibility. And we would intend to not do that. Can I say, a year ago, I would say, we're never gonna do that. Maybe not a year ago.
Right.
A year and a half ago, I would have said we're never gonna do that. I can't predict what might happen. I do think one thing about it is, just the fact that teachers are putting their assignments onto Google Classroom, and a kid takes their device home and can access it and communicate with other students and things. That's gonna be, I'm hoping to get to a world where you may be sick for a while, you may go home and be sick for a while, you may break your leg and be in the hospital for 2 weeks. We have a better method to get you your stuff besides when mom can stop by or send it with little brother, or whatever. We have a better model for that, but I'm hoping that we don't have to have any. And if it's going to persist beyond that, I would foresee us looking at creating a virtual school where that's the option. And if a kid had to be gone for extended period of times, maybe we transfer, That would be, I don't anticipate it being the issue, but if it does, that would be my answer. I will say this, there are some options out there for other districts that do have virtual schools where we can retain a student within our district but have them teach them virtually. And yes, the base state aid for virtual students would come out of them, but it would be an option that then they could transfer right back in, and they would be a Rossville or a St. Mary's graduate at the end of it all. So you would retain the students' enrollment, but they would get their learning virtually through another school. And so I think if it's a problem that persists, we will just start our own and grow from there.
That's a major undertaking.
It is not
A
easy.
major undertaking.
I did it once before
Yeah,
at Lakin,
okay.
and it's not like you just sign up and say you're gonna do it. You have to pilot it for a year before they'll let you actually, and you have to prove that it'll work. we did adults at the same time. That's where we had our success. It was not a successful program. I mean, it was for individuals who, that was the only way they could get to school. But the adults, we had a lot of adult graduates that came back and got their high school diploma, and that was a big deal. So, something to celebrate, I guess. I don't think it's a great option. It would have to be a lot of students for me to really want to, but if it becomes an issue ongoing, that's what we would want to do.
John, Alan, thoughts, comments?
I do want to say this. Christy is working on, we're trying to come up with the fringe that is appropriate for employees. And it's hard because right now, what we have always done is we've always said, well, the part of the premium we pay is the fringe for the employee. But the problem with that is, the reason the premium is so low is because the district pays all of the claims up to a certain amount for those employees. So what we're looking at doing is not, I mean, we could take the claims and divide them by the employees that take insurance. But that's not really fair either, because I have a bunch of kids and Jason doesn't, so my claim should be out. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna count the number of people actually covered by the plan. So instead of 177 employees that take the insurance, that covers many more people than that. So we're gonna take the claims, divide it by the larger number, and then we're gonna look at that number and see if that shouldn't be added on to the fringe. Since that's what it's doing, is it's paying down premiums by, keeping premiums down by paying the first amount. That's what other districts are doing, and so we do. And the only reason I even say that is when we start reporting it that way, it'll look like this big jump in fringe, and that'll be for everybody. I mean, every employee, but it's not that we're getting a whole bunch more in fringe. It's just we've been able to keep the premium low because we pay those claims. We also, to be perfectly honest, we're tight on cash, and it's gonna be this way for a while, this time of year, because we don't get our allotment till June from the state. And we used to get all that tax money from the counties, and it would sit with us, so we had cash available, and then at the end of the year, we took a check to Topeka for whatever was left. But, about 3 years ago, the state changed it to where all county tax money goes directly to the state, and then they choose to send it out. Well, so we're getting very little allotment per month, and then we get a big check in June. So our cash flow is low, which isn't that big a deal, except why are we waiting until the last of the year we're waiting for the last of the year, and then we're gonna spend a third of our, budget. That's not the way it works. Yes, teacher salaries for July and August, that is a big chunk of it, people that are getting 12 months. But the reason I bring it up is last year we got into, this was an example of how bad it could be. Last year, we didn't have very many claims from March until June, okay? Because nobody went to the doctor.
Sure.
So we didn't have very many claims then. So then, July to October, we had a huge number of claims. Well, that money for those claims comes out of this year's budget. And then we start over with the new plan year. So we start, and we pay a lot of claims at the beginning of the year, because at the beginning of the year, nobody's reached their max. So right now, not only are we waiting on money in June from the state, we also have had to pay claims for a big chunk at the beginning of the year, because, it was more than a quarter, because for one quarter it sat empty. And then we paid you know, the first part of everybody's, you know, not during, I mean, during the first 3 parts of the year, not a lot of people reach their max and we start getting money back. So we paid a lot of claims. So all of those things have to, I mean, have us in this position where, you know, there's just not a lot of cash available. Like we have budget authority, that doesn't do us any good. So that's where we are, and we'll get through it. I mean, it'll be. But if your principals are saying no, you can't use the credit card or anything, just give them a break because they really can't.
So I was late in sending out the teacher survey. I just did it today as far as concerns, and we've got 47 responses, but one of the things that's been coming up quite a bit questioning wise is President's Day.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and so this is what I would say. Something had to give. That was the only one that was not a paid holiday for 9-month employees, and we could have started a day sooner at the front end, or we could have started a day later, or started a day earlier, or went a day later. But to get we kind of have the start and the end of the year where we want them, and to do anything else, I mean, we could have not had 2 full weeks for Christmas. We could have, you know, all of those things to get, and we added a lot of professional development, and that was purposeful, but that's the one thing that we had to, I mean, we had to give one day, and it could have been Martin Luther King Day. It could have, but that was that's a professional development day. You could have went to school that day and moved, you know, those were the 2 options. We kind of felt like there's a day that's off in February for the end of parent-teacher conferences, and we just felt like that was our best bet. Yeah, that's, when you start making the calendar every year, you set it in there exactly the way you had it, and then you put in the stuff that you have to, and then we could have came back, you know, for half a professional day. We could have had that day, and we could have had half a PD day next week in May, or we could have brought kids on a Monday. I think, do they come on Tuesday or Wednesday? I think they were coming on Thursday, they're coming on Wednesday. It would have been Tuesday, and we felt like that was probably the best compromise. But yes, I mean, it wasn't that, and I had people ask me too, and that's what
This might not be something we need to bring up now, but supplemental, the video production
yes.
people, if they're expected to do what they did this year, which has been phenomenal, and so many more people are getting to watch our kids, and I think it's phenomenal. They did receive a bonus this year,
Yes.
I believe.
They got a second supplemental.
Okay, so I guess we just would like to know if that's gonna continue.
I think that's definitely something that can be discussed in this group, because I mean, the board definitely understands. And we love the fact that they did it, not knowing they were gonna get an additional supplemental. You know, I mean, that's the kind of people we have working for us. But if this is gonna continue the way it is, we're gonna have to look at that. We also talked about, and what some people do, and this has just come up recently because I was asking people, and there was kind of a expectation of how many events there were when we calculated their original thing. What some people do is they better calculate that, come up with a supplemental, and then there's also additional if you go above the
number.
So like, let's say there's 90 events, like, I think, I'm not sure, Mark, but you correct me, I think the original thing was like 35.
I think it was 30.
30, so 30, we did that in September and October,
Right.
Yeah.
you know? And so, to make it what it is, what it needs to be, we're open to that discussion. We know that that's not something that,
It might be worth looking at the supplemental base again. It's been 3 years, 2 years? I don't know for sure. I should have wrote that down, but
I remember, I mean,
it's
we
been
did
a
it.
couple of years at
Was
least.
it 2019, 2018?
I think it was within the last two.
Yeah.
Seems recent.
I mean, and
It might
and it
be
does
too.
need to be evaluated, you know, periodically. I mean, and, you know, at the same time, it needs to be evaluated if the, you know, because as things change and evolve, they might become more or bigger than they were originally, and the number of events and that kind of thing. So we probably just, I mean, you guys can look at it and see what you think. Now, again, that doesn't change the amount of money we have, but it might be better spent, you know? Or even, you know, I don't know what I made a spreadsheet last time, I think, that if I put a little money in, how much it would affect the overall cost. So if I can find that again, that might be worth looking at as well.
I don't know what would be the easier way to look at that, because, you know, coaches, of course, bring it up every year, but it wouldn't hurt for us to have some sort of system. And it doesn't have to be in writing or anything like that, but, you know, like, we're gonna look at supplemental at least every 2 years or 3 years. Because for me, now that I'm not coaching, it's not something I'm thinking about as often, but all the other coaches are, and
Yeah.
it's something that probably needs to be looked at a little more regularly.
And that's like, I have not I mean, I get stuff from KSB all the time showing how much people get paid for doing this and that and everything, and I have not seen the supplemental one. I haven't seen one. I mean, not just this year, like,
Right.
I don't know that I've ever seen one that, so, but we could definitely get it from league
Yeah.
schools and stuff like that,
Be
easy.
interesting, because I know Muncie, theirs goes off of just their normal salary schedule.
The base,
not-
like the base,
there's
when the
no
base gets a
supplement.
bump,
Yeah.
so does the.
Yeah, every coach, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna fight for more money as a coach.
And we understand that.
And maybe a system of, you know, X dollars get added to the regular base, you know, the teacher's salary. Maybe there's some formula that can be made that causes a yearly addition to
Well,
the base supplemental. You know
There-
what I mean?
that-
So it's
and-
not just something that has to be negotiated all the time. It's just,
Right.
I don't know if it would be like a 50% maybe type of thing. I don't know what the numbers would work out to be, but it might be an easier way of making that happen instead of just neglecting it this year and next year. We'll get to it every third year.
and it's easy to say, when you put it on the base, it goes to everyone equally, and then you put it into supplementals, it goes to those who have the supplementals. Which, I mean, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but in the end, if you're trying to, it's easy to say that, so.
Right.
If you had something, I like that idea, I don't know what, I mean, I'll play around with it.
Yeah.
I tinker with those kind of things all the time.
Well, and like a couple of years ago, we raised the volleyball percentage because they were going to way more things than they had 10 years ago, or whatever.
And they they moved them to
Weekends.
weekends.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
that
so
was a
there's,
big,
like,
that's a big thing to do.
Different things that evolved that it doesn't hurt to look at.
Okay, well, I will, let me, I will look at that. You can do it too, you see what you think. I will look at that. I will, when I get the audited number of students, then I'll make sure I know the exact amount. And that might be, we have a superintendent's meeting tomorrow, so it could come out, he could have turned his numbers in to hit the system and they could come out tomorrow, I don't know. But when we get that, we do meet on the 10th, and so then hopefully we would be able to, look at, not that we'd be able to have an offer and then we could go back.
Yeah, I would like to get this done sooner than later.
I would too, and I think these guys would be right in the same boat. And I promise I will do the best to make both sides happy and do what we can, so.
Like I said before, I think the one thing we maybe have going for us is the similarity of this year's money to last year's money.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind, although there are those couple of additions you talked about, but some of that's,
But that's
one
gonna-
of that's out
that-
of Esser's, but one is not, is that?
We're gonna pay for them out of Esser's.
Okay,
We're gonna pay for both of them out of Esser's. And the idea is hopefully we'll be able to keep those positions in place, but they, as long as they're paid for out of Esser's, there could be something at the end of the 3 year, after the 3rd year, there is something that's gonna be said for what do we pay for them then after that. Just so you know, and we're gonna keep our nurses' aides on as well too, and that's something we want to keep on into the future. That's not something we want to stop. Partially because that also gives us the ability to get a better handle on the data in Power School and all of that, and make it readily available to teachers and anybody who might need it, and keep it up to date because we have enough. We're not bombarded. But also, that's the kind of thing that at the end of the 3 year cycle, we will have to evaluate what, it is. The state is also in a good place with what their plan is moving forward for funding schools. So I do feel like that will be, I think that will help take care of it. We don't know what our need will be. I would love it if, at the end of 2 years, our title teachers are going, yeah, we don't have anything to do. You guys got them all on grade level and they're all just doing great. That'd be great. That'd be a great problem. But I don't know that that's going to happen. So.
I know it's early, but where are we at on hiring for replacements of people?
We are interviewing in the next 2 weeks. I think we have applicants for all of our positions, our open positions, which I think is really good.
Yeah.
So, and I've been pleasantly surprised with the candidate pool, just thinking a lot of people may just not want to go. I don't want to leave, because I don't know what's going to happen. There's so much unknown. I'm just not going to move, but I do think that people want to be here, because we're getting some good quality people that have experience and, I didn't know what to expect, I guess.
Yeah. Set the next meeting date?
Yeah, we could meet that after the 10th. I think the 12th is the next Wednesday. It doesn't have to be a Wednesday. That's been a historically good day for most people.
Wednesdays at 4 work great for me.
that's fine with me.
What day?
Wednesday,
12th.
12th.
Yep, that's it.
$4 you said, you're sending out the,
I'm going to. Yeah, let's not send. Didn't we do it 3 times last time?
I'm gonna be better about that this year, I'll put it in my calendar, so, and then give it in my calendar again.
Okay, so you guys gotta give me a little pause because I don't have a mouse and I'm trying to use this trackpad, and so I'm not a very good typer anyway.
It's hanging down in front of you.
Is it? I couldn't find it earlier. That's good to know. Okay. That's Scott always makes fun of me too because he's like, do you want a wireless mouse? And I'm like, no, because then the batteries run out and it drives me crazy. I'll just have a wired mouse. I obviously can't take care of a wired mouse.
It's the other one.
No, this one?
Yeah.
All right.
That's also right, youth group, freshman welcome, senior farewell.
Okay, this is all not really have anything to do with it, but summer school,
Yes.
what do we do when the parents choose not to send their kids?
We're gonna try and do some reaching out to try and encourage them, but if it's not mandatory attendance, there's not.
Right.
We are gonna talk to them, I don't know about in your building specifically, but we are gonna talk about the possibility of part-time. If you don't wanna sign up to come 4 days a week, maybe you sign up to come on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so we're gonna try and encourage them, and we're gonna try and do some other things. Like, I know one of the things they were talking about at the high schools was tying it with if they're gonna be there for weights and conditioning, getting a breakfast, going, doing your weights and conditioning, then going to get a little help from the math teacher, and then pick up your lunch, and 2 hot meals, and making your coach happy, and you get caught up a little bit. That sounds like a pretty good day for me, and get the social interaction, and we have some kids that the social interaction is what they need, and so that's a good way at the high schools, I think. So, what are we gonna do? We don't have an exact answer, but we're gonna try and modify it and do whatever we can for any individual kid. But at the end of the day, it's not mandatory.
I know Brad was talking about in our building that they, during their flex time, they would fill the gaps, but my concern is if I'm the one that needs to be filling the gaps, but I'm teaching, that's why the at-risk person would be great in our building.
Right, and I do think they have, both high schools have someone that's in a role like that, but it's just a matter of getting the junior high on with it, and it's, the high schools are complicated, the whole thing about, the flex mod is gonna be great, but we don't even know what we don't know about it.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm telling you, I looked at my kids and, the possibilities and stuff, and I'm like, I would have loved this. This would have been, I would have loved it, and I would have thrived. No, I did fine. I graduated, I went on to school, so I did fine in school, but I can remember my senior year not really wanting to be in that building any longer, and it was because I was in class. I would have loved to have went down with Mr. Brown and spent a little extra time in the shop because I had all my other homework done. I would have loved to, Mr. DeSelms, I always liked Mr. DeSelms. I was never a great artist, but I always liked to hear him tell stories. I would have done that. I would have went and drawn for hours to listen to him tell stories. So, yeah, you're right, and it's not that we've tried to work on that side, and then we were trying to look at where the student-teacher ratio was the lowest, and it's not. I know it doesn't work that way because you have 4 English teachers, that looks like a low student-teacher ratio, but everybody has to go through English every year. So and then you have some small classes because it's an elective that a few kids need and really want, and it's worth it. But then so it probably will always be a little bit lower at the high schools, just nature of the beast. But we do have we've made a little bit of effort to try and get some people in those positions now, to those helper type positions, and so I
Just
think.
don't forget about junior high, because we kind of are the stepchild.
And that is, and that does happen
Yes.
at times, so. Not on purpose,
I know.
I would never, but I taught junior high too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you guys,
Thank you.
everybody.
Awesome.